Hello, I'm Jonathan Behrens, and I will be discussing the occult horror subgenre. Have you been bombarded by the presence of strange, evil forces? Ever trifled with satanic powers? Or found yourself wrapped up in the center of a local legend or myth? Then you just might be a character in an occult horror film. This genre is all about the idea of human beings interacting with the supernatural and the fantastical, and meddling with forces beyond their comprehension. The subgenre has also acted as a conduit between the mainstream audiences and the more bizarre and strange aspects of human cultures. Whether this may be Satanism, sex, or even befriending a local vampire who eats all the kids who bully you. Occult horror has become a way in which audiences can safely interact with the taboo and bizarre. As the subgenre has evolved, it has also become very outspoken on the social issues plaguing society. Please, sit back and discover the fascinating history of the occult horror subgenre. As early film began to experiment with the nature of fear and terror, one common element that came about was the exploration of many Judeo-Christian myths and stories, often utilizing demonic creatures and satanic imagery. From George Méliès's 1897 picture, The Haunted Castle, where a group of men are literally visited by the devil himself, to La Inferno, a bizarre and terrifying adaptation of Dante's Inferno that makes extensive use of demons, little devils, and Catholic allegories. One of the best examples of this is the 1922 Danish film Haxen, showcasing different depictions of witchcraft throughout history. Many of these depictions are purposefully shocking, including the image of a baby being bled and then cooked for a group of demons, Satan being a nun to death, and lots of gratuitous nudity. But by focusing on mainly historical church texts and using a docudrama style of reenactment, it makes these very arcane threats to humanity much more palpable and realistic. This film offers a groundwork for many of the films that follow. As a sexual revolution and the second wave of feminism was hitting America in the latter half of the 20th century, anxieties of the newfound freedom granted to women began to seep into cinematic conventions and form. Two films in particular that I'd like to highlight are 1968's Rosemary's Baby and 1979's The Brood. Rosemary's Baby tells the story of a woman who unknowingly becomes impregnated with the son of Satan when her husband makes a deal with a group of Satanists in exchange for his success. As Maya Farrow's Rosemary carries the demonic spawn, she experiences a multitude of maladies, such as eating raw meat, weight loss, and chronic pain. She is also repeatedly denied any sense of help or support from anyone around her. 5 years before the events of Roe v. Wade, this film was already starting a dialogue about a woman fighting for agency over her body and having to suffer under the weight of a patriarchal system that forcefully denies it. In Christopher Sharratt's essay, The Horror Film as Social Allegory and How It Comes Undone, he highlights many of the ways in which the film addresses truth about 20th century gender relations, from Rosemary being raped by Satan and then lied to about it, to her doctors gaslighting her concerns about pains and strange physical feelings. Rosemary discovering the truth about her baby and being compelled to care for it regardless of how truly evil these events are, or how she was manipulated into the situation to begin with, has many parallels to the real fears women had to confront during much of the 20th century and continue to today. A similar approach to underscoring the anxieties of motherhood can be found in The Brood, when a worrisome new mother gives birth to a litter of demonic spawn. This film also talks about the anxieties of pregnancy and modern womanhood from a female perspective, except it goes exceedingly further with the horror of the concept. For example, the character Nola gives birth when her womb isn't even still inside her body, physically manifesting the ancient Greek definitions of hysteria. Both of these films epitomize the fears of women whose sense of power and autonomy is represented by control over their bodies that is forcefully and systematically ripped from characters by often patriarchal or hypermasculine forces. Something very common in the history of the occult horror film is the presence of a cabin in the woods. It's a horror staple as old as the genre itself, and has appeared in numerous films such as Cabin Fever and Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. One of the earliest iterations of this image can be found in the 1947 thriller The Red House, where a pair of teenagers are forbidden to enter a forest, hiding a large red house at the behest of the property's owner. Eventually, it's revealed that the owner of the woods in the house had committed multiple murders in it when he was conducting an affair with a married woman. The true pinnacle of the cabin in the woods motif can be found in 1981's The Evil Dead, about a group of college students that go on vacation to a remote cabin in the woods. The film is full of imagery that has since been reimagined and replicated, such as the presence of a MacGuffin, the woods becoming possessed and used to kill people, dismembered body parts acting independently, and of course, Ash's use of the ultimate horror weapon, a chainsaw. Evil Dead is filled with all kinds of occult elements, unstoppable supernatural forces, possession, and especially reanimation of dead bodies. What may be the most occult element of the film is the Nataran de Manto, a Sumerian version of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. This book is very similar to H.P. Lovecraft's fictional grimoire, the Necronomicon, referenced in many of his short stories. Not only are these texts used to conjure ancient demonic spirits and raise the dead, but they also act as a cinematic MacGuffin, which become vital to a film's plot. Other talismans of this nature can be found in many other films, such as the videotape in Ringu, the button in Drag Me to Hell, or even the storybook in The Babadook. It has become a very common trope in the occult genre to see a person invite demonic or evil forces by interacting with some sort of cursed object. Evil Dead also represents a trend in the occult genre in terms of cinematography that can be seen in many other films. Much of the film can be characterized by the use of long takes, point-of-view shots, and tracking and panning movement. This kind of camera work can also be found in 1960's Black Sunday, an early occult film that first popularized many of the genre's elements, such as witches, reanimation, stylized use of gore, and an unstoppable supernatural force. This cinematic language can even be found in films as recently as It Follows, which utilizes similar camera work and long takes to build suspense and dread. As iterations in the occult horror genre enter the 21st century, they've taken on a clear narrative and cinematic framework established by the decades before. The primary ways in which these films express themselves are through folklore and social allegory. Two films in particular that exemplify this idea of utilizing folklore to the genre's advantage are 2015's The Witch and 2016's The Wailing. The Witch combines 17th century legends and local mythos with historic facts and texts and manipulates them in order to tell a truly terrifying story. This film has many similarities with early occult films by showcasing a family thrust into the throes of demonic forces at the will of Satan. However, The Witch is unique in its approach by focusing on the devastation of the family unit and withholding any image of the witch herself. Instead of being given details on the process of the witch, we often only witness violence occurring in obscure darkness or by seeing its aftermath. By watching a family slowly be divided and picked off one by one, we start to understand that the real fear comes from the desecration of our most sacred relationships. The South Korean Wailing, on the other hand, is all about making us wonder and doubt the narrative framework of the local legends that it's using to tell its story. As a small town and a family within it are ravaged by a string of strange murders, the culprit seems to be a strange Japanese man who has recently arrived. As the story's characters investigate further, they start to believe that the real culprit is a strange woman in white who's been seen around town. But by the end, it's clear that this man, now an ugly troll-like creature known as an Oni, has committed all these atrocities and has gotten away with them by leading investigators to believe in all the red herrings he's put up. The brilliance in this film is the way in which it establishes what seems like a very traditional folktale and deliberately misleads audiences to create a bigger surprise when the film's culprit is revealed to be who we suspected the entire time, but in a way we didn't expect. In conclusion, the occult horror genre is filled with all kinds of terrifyingly fantastical elements, But whether we're watching demons dance with women, or teenagers meddling with cursed objects, the genre has always found exciting ways to explore the strange and unknown. It also allows us to explore the more taboo and controversial aspects of society. The way the genre has purposefully examined and challenged many mainstream societal values has allowed it to explore many subversive themes and topics that many genres in mainstream filmmaking have traditionally avoided. This is just one of the unique characteristics of the paranormal, occult subgenre that is unique about it, not just compared to other 20th century films, but almost all horror films as a whole.